So this week I was having a conversation with somebody, as I often do. This one was digital. And the guy I was talking to said, free will is very important to me. I started thinking about that. Well, I think free will is important to all of us. But what is free will? The title of today's sermon is, what is free will? No, seriously, I'm asking. I do not know. Because there's a lot of words that we use that we have no idea what they actually mean. And many of us use words all the time, and we literally have no idea what those words mean. Literally. Now I'm saying, like, literally is one of the words that we don't know what it means. Because most of the time when we say literally, we're actually meaning figuratively. Right? So we say words, we have no idea what they mean. Capitalism, socialism, we have no idea what those words mean. Republic, democracy, we don't know what those words mean. We know what we've been told they mean. We don't know what they mean. In other words, repent. Most people don't know what the word repent means. Forgiveness. No, we don't know what that means. We don't know what it means to forgive. When it says, we got to forgive her. Well, how do I do that? What does it mean to forgive somebody? You forget about what they did to you? You're not mad that they hurt you anymore? No. Well, what does it mean then? I don't know. Just forgive them. Right? Dunce. We talked about dunce a lot, right? Dunce, we think of somebody that's stupid. Dunce literally means somebody who is a student of John Duns Scotus, meaning that they're pursuing a higher education. Dunce is a term for a scholar. We say it as somebody who's stupid. So we say words all the time, and we have no idea what they mean. And I recognize this week that free will is another one of those words. We don't know what it means. And so I always think back, and I always say this is Thomas Merton. I've really been trying to find it, and I talked to my one professor who's a Merton scholar, and I said, where did Merton say this? He goes, well, I don't know, but I mean, it sure sounds like him. And the phrase is, the free will to do whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it, is the lowest form of being. Right? It's the lowest form of freedom. So the ability to do whatever you want to do, whenever you want to do it, is the lowest form of freedom. But we think that's free will. Free will is me being able to do whatever I want to do. I can do whatever I want to do, whenever I want to do it. And so there's times where I feel that my free will has been violated, and I get upset. I get angry. How dare you not let me do whatever it is I want to do, whenever it is I want to do it? For some people who have struggled with addiction, they can understand this because free will is important. But when you become an addict, you don't have free will anymore. Now, once again, I talk about my past. I was never an addict. Luckily, I never had to go to rehab. I didn't have to go to meetings. I was able to just kind of quit before I became fully an addict. But I definitely was an abuser. And alcohol had a certain power over me. I didn't have to drink every day. I didn't need it. I didn't get the shakes if I didn't, like people who have severe alcoholism. But for me, it was, once I had 3, I couldn't stop. I didn't have the ability not to have the 4th, and the 5th, and the 6th, and the 7th, and the 8th, and the 9th, and the 10th, and the 11th, and the 12th. So the more I drank at a specific time, the more I lost my free will. I couldn't stop. And then, it ended up turning out really bad. It was always a bad night for Jessica. It didn't turn out well for her because the drunker I got, the weirder I got, and the stupider things I did. Once again, I was never angry, but I did really stupid stuff. Because once again, I wasn't functioning in my free will. Some people who have an addiction, they wake up this morning and everything about what they're doing is trying to figure out how to get $20 to get a packet of heroin to shoot it into their veins. They're not choosing to do it. They've completely lost their free will to do anything other than that. And so, but is that free will? What does free will actually mean? And is it important to us to have free will? Is it important for us to be able to be free? And what does freedom mean? What does it mean to be free? Because Christ has set me free. Christ has given me all the freedom I'll ever need. But yet I'm still not allowed to do whatever I want to do whenever I want to do it. I still had 2 days this week where my free will was violated. I couldn't pull out of my driveway. I mean, I was allowed to. I just physically couldn't get out of my driveway. So did the snowstorm, did Landon violate my free will? Jessica was in love with Landon. Jessica is very fond of Landon. Landon got her 2 days out of work this week. She loves her some Landon. I didn't even know who Landon was. She started talking about Landon. I'm like, who's Landon? She's like, I guess that's the name of the storm. I thought she was trying to tell me something that I didn't want to hear. So, thinking about free will, I went to Deuteronomy, the often preached out of and beloved book of Deuteronomy. I'm sure you all know it very well. Spent a lot of time in Deuteronomy. Anybody know what Deuteronomy means? See, we use words, we don't know what they mean. It's the second giving of the law. Deuter is second, and the rest of it means something about law. I don't know. I don't know Hebrew. But it's something about the second giving of the law. Leviticus is the giving of the law. Deuteronomy is the second giving of the law. And they're different, which is weird. So Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 15. It says, "See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you today, by loving the Lord your God, by walking in his ways, and by keeping his commandments and his statutes and his rules, then you will live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. But if your heart turns away, and you will not hear, but are drawn away to worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall surely perish." Once again, perish is a word we don't know what it means. "You shall not live long in the land that you are going over the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life, that you and your offspring may live." Right? So once again, you walk away from the Lord, you don't follow the Lord, you don't die and then be consciously tormented in hell forever and ever and ever. You perish. Perish is a word that doesn't mean dying and going to hell. Perish is a word that means ceasing to exist. Just like in John 3:16, for God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him shall never perish, cease to exist, but will have eternal life. Right? It's important to know what words mean. Anyway, I don't know why I go off on tangents sometimes, but I do. So when thinking about free will, and you type in, what does the Bible say about free will? This is the passage that comes up. How do I know that? Because this is what I Googled this morning, and this is the passage that came up when I Googled it this morning. But what is it saying here? It's saying that free will is the ability to choose between good and evil. Free will was decided in the Garden of Eden, right? You all know I've given God a really hard time for putting the tree there in the first place, right? God put all these trees out there in the whole garden, all these trees, and then he put one tree in the middle of the garden. He said, don't eat of that tree. And then he left. He left. The only time God has ever been separated from humanity was at the tree. Because when does it say? Then said after a while, God came back, walked back up to Adam and Eve, and said, "Hey, how you guys doing?" Again, it's just a story. Please understand, it's just a story. But once again, if God didn't put the tree there to begin with, we never could have eaten of the tree and we got ourselves in this big mess. So it's all God's fault for putting the tree there. Right? But God had to put the tree there to give us the choice to choose life or death. Because if he doesn't put the tree there, then we don't have free will. We don't have the ability to choose which trees or tree we want to eat from. You okay, Loretta? You all right? Okay. So is free will boiled down to just us being able to make the decision to live evil or to live good? And obviously I struggle with that. Obviously I struggle with books like Deuteronomy, because is God actually saying this? Or is this what people think God said and then they wrote it down? Is this actually God showing up and speaking? or just a human being saying, yeah, I think that's what God's trying to say? And then we get in ourselves our trouble, because then what's part of the Bible is God speaking, what probably is not, and if I'm making that choice, then I got myself a lot of power or a lot of trouble. But some of this I can buy into, but some of it troubles me, because it's all about this one choice. And oh, by the way, according to this book, my free will was taken from me, because I don't have a choice which tree to eat from. That choice was made for me by Adam and Eve. So now did Adam and Eve steal my free will? Is it Adam and Eve who made me grow up believing all the lies that I've been told? Is it Adam and Eve's fault that I listened to those lies and believed those lies and then begin to tell my own lies? Well, I didn't have free will. I inherited this gene. I inherited the sin that they chose at the garden, which, once again, they didn't consult me on. So how am I punished for their decision? Why am I having to pay the consequence for somebody else's action, which we say is not just? Once again, please understand, I have no idea what free will means. We're going to wrestle this out. Talk about this for a minute. Because we say we have free will, but then we also say we have original sin. Original sin takes away free will. I don't have the ability to make that choice whether I'm going to choose the tree of life or the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Or is Adam and Eve a story of humanity and individuals, and God showing us everything that's available to us, and us saying, nah, I'll just take the one? And we all made that decision. Did we all choose to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil for ourselves? But why did we choose to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Because just like Adam and Eve in the story, we were deceived. We were told, this is the tree you're supposed to eat from. Everybody else is doing it. And once again, if everybody else is doing it, how could that go wrong? Right? It's always good logic. If everybody else is doing it. One time in third grade, they got in trouble for something. And apparently I didn't make this up. I thought I did at the time. It just popped in my head. And the teacher said, well, if everybody else has jumped off a bridge with you, I said, well, if the water was warm, sounds like fun. Why wouldn't you jump off a bridge into warm water? You know what I mean? And people jump off diving boards all the time. I mean, you're jumping off a bridge. The bridge is obviously over water. Why else would you build a bridge? I mean, I guess maybe the Grand Canyon, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's some bridges that go over gaps that aren't water filled. But, I'm not going to jump into cold water. That would be absurd. But, it's just the way my mind's always worked. If everybody else is doing it, how could you be wrong? So we continue to eat from this one tree, even though we have the free will to eat of all the other trees. And so some passages say that the free will is just my ability to choose good and evil. Our Christian theology tells us I don't have free will because Adam and Eve made the decision for me. So what does it mean to have free will? Where does free will come from? And as always, I tend to try to put on my new self and say in Colossians. Colossians is a very interesting book. I'm going to read quite a bit. There's quite a bit to read here. Colossians Chapter 3. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your mind on the things that are above, not on the things that are on earth, for you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away. Anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in the knowledge after the image of its Creator. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised, uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave or free, but Christ is all and in all. Put on, then, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, bearing with one another. And if one has a complaint against another, forgiving each other. As the Lord has forgiven you, so also you might forgive. And above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. Now, once again, some troubling things here. Things that kind of make me wonder, but also continue to have to wrestle. Because if there weren't there, then I would have all the answers, right? We want to continue to wrestle. But if you've been raised with Christ, seek the things above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Wait a second. Here in a couple passages, you're going to say Christ is in us. But now you're saying that He's not in us. He's seated at the right hand of God, and we're waiting for Him to come back. So which is it? Has He come back in us, or is He still seated at the right hand of God the Father Almighty? Or He's infinite. He's not a being. He's not space. He's everywhere. He is everything. Once again, Christ is all. Right? So it's not like we think of God, we think of Christ, we think of the Holy Spirit, and we humanize them. We give them human attributes. We use human terms to describe them. They're not human. He's not a being that is in a place. He is the cosmos, the cosmic Christ. Everything that exists in Him, by Him, for Him, and through Him. All things were created by Him, for Him, and through Him, and in Him. Right? He is everything. Now, once again, we are not Christ, but Christ is us. Christ is everything that lives and breathes and has its being. Because they all exist in Him, for Him, through Him. I continue to talk about it. I'll just read it. He, Christ, is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation, for by Him all things were created in heaven and in earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or dominions or rules or authorities. All things were created through Him and for Him, and He is before all things, and in Him all things hold together. He is the head of the body of the church. He's the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that everything He might be preeminent. Right? Also in Colossians, that's Colossians Chapter 1. So when I start reading about this, I start reading about there's a time when I was born and I didn't really have free will. Because I learned based upon what I was taught. And do as I say, not as I do, never works. I was always told, do as I say, not as I do. I never did what they said. I always did what they did. Because we learn by seeing. We don't learn by hearing all the time. And so when we grow up in our environment, we see what we see, and then that teaches us who we are. And most of that isn't necessarily true, because we don't always grow up in the most secure environments. We don't always grow up in the most friendly places. Sometimes we grow up in very hostile places. Sometimes we go through very traumatic things. Sometimes the people who are biologically programmed to love us and embrace us and accept us don't. These things tell us lies, and they allow us to begin to craft a picture of us, they craft a story of us that isn't true. And now I've lost my free will because I'm living out a story that isn't true. Last week we talked about Aaron's story. He had to live the story out because he didn't have the free will to say, I don't want to live this story anymore. Because all he's ever been told is, this is your story. You can't change it. And it's nonsense. We can edit the movie. We can change the ending. We can kick out the characters that we don't like. But we've been told you can't. You go to the movie theater, you watch the movie, you have to accept, I would have liked a better ending. Well, you can't change it. You're not in control of it. And that's true. I'm not in control of your movie. But I am in control of mine. I do get to dictate what characters play a part in my life. I get to dictate what characters have a scene in the movie of my life. And if I don't want them in the scene, I don't want them playing that part, I kick them out. If you're not going to help me understand the truth of who I am, you don't need to be here. And it might be your mom. It might be a kid. It might be a sibling. It might be a neighbor. It might be your pastor. If they're not convincing you of the truth of who you are, they don't need to be in your story. Period. Because this is your story. You have the free will to write it the way you want it written. You have the free will to have the characters in it that you want to be in it. I don't get to tell you how your story plays out. But a lot of times I can, because I've seen it before. Because it's like there's not an original movie in Hollywood, there's not an original story in humanity. We all continue to play out the same stories over and over and over again. The woman who's in an abusive relationship gets out of the abusive relationship and ends up right back up in another one. Why? Because this is who I am. I'm a battered woman. That's how I live my life. That's just part of my story. No, it's not. Stop living that story. Well, I'm an abusive alcoholic because that's what my dad was. My dad was an abusive alcoholic, so I had to turn out just like him because, that's just who I am. No, it's not. Stop letting people in your life tell you who you are. Once again, it's not usually by their words, it's by their actions. This is your story. And you have the free will to write it the way you want it written. You have the free will to cast it how you want it to be cast. We all get to be famous movie directors. And I'm going to write my story. I'm going to direct my story. I'm going to act in my story. I'm going to edit my story. I'm going to produce my story. Because that's my free will. I get to decide to take off my old self, as he's talking about in here. I get to decide to stop lying to each other. And once again, I'm not lying to you because I'm telling you your hair looks nice when it really doesn't. I'm lying to you because I'm showing you a version of me that's not true. I'm saying, this is who I am. This is how I treat people. No, it's not. Stop lying to people by living out of the old self. Stop lying to people by living out of the version of you that was written by somebody else. Start being who you're supposed to be. Put on your true self. Write your story. Live out your version of what you want your life to be. Now, my hope is, in all of that, you choose it to be with Christ. Because what's the point of writing one false story, or getting rid of one false story and replacing it with another one that's not true? Because the fact of the matter is that the center of your being, the core of who you are, is God's son and God's daughter. That is who you are. That is who you will always be. I am young enough to envision a day when there is no longer a United States of America. And that's okay. Because my identity is not as an American. My identity is as a son of God. And that is the identity, it's the only piece of my identity that will never change. Jessica might leave me for Landon one day, and I'm no longer a husband. But I'm still going to be God's son. My kids are going to grow up and move out one day, and I'm not necessarily going to be a parent in the same way I'm a parent now. So if I put my identity as being a parent to young children, and then my children grow up and they move out of the house, I didn't just have my children move out, I lost my identity as being their parent. We can always, Terry Wardle says, you never place your identity in anything you can lose. And the fact is that most of us have placed our identities in a lot of things that we can lose. I place my identity, I'm a electrician. Well, then you get fired and you're not an electrician. You didn't just lose your job, you lost your identity. Well, I'm a husband. Your wife leaves you. You didn't just lose your wife, you lost your identity. I'm a drug addict. Well, then you get sober. You didn't just lose your addiction, you lost your identity as a drug addict. That might be a good one to lose. Right? We're always placing our identities in things that we're not. So the fact of the matter is, who are we? We are God's sons and we are God's daughters. What does it mean to be God's son and be God's daughter? And it's not sitting around waiting for a punishment one day. It's being able to live out Christ in you, the hope of glory. That you no longer have to live the life. You no longer have to continue to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Christ in you, the hope of glory, gives you the ability to write your own story of what it means to be God's son and to be God's daughter. I don't have to live the lies I've always been told about me, because God knows me better than anybody else. I'm sorry your dad sucked and did terrible things to you and said terrible things to you, but your father never did. I'm sorry your dad walked out on you when you were 6. Your father has been with you the whole time. These are things that will never not be true. I'm sorry your mom used to get mad at your dad and take it out on you by hitting you with a wooden spoon. The mother God never did those things to you. She was always there. She was always there with an embrace and a love and a hug and a kiss. I'm sorry people get mad at you and tell you you're stupid. God's never thought that about you. I'm sorry people tell you that you're no good and you're unworthy. All God's ever tried to get you to hear and get you to say is that you are worthy and that you are good. God himself paid the ultimate price on the cross to get you to see the truth of who you are, to get you to see the truth of your worth and your value, and everything God has ever thought about you is found on the cross. The cross says you're good enough. The cross says it's time for you to change your story. Rewrite it. Embrace your free will to change who the world has told you you are. You don't have to live this way anymore. It's a beautiful song we sung earlier. If I tell you my story, I'm telling you it's Him. And it's a beautiful story. But not all of us are living that story right now. Because right now, if some people told us our story, it isn't a story of triumph. It's a story of tragedy. So let's change it. Let's rewrite the story. Let's give it a better ending. Let's give it better characters. Let's make it a story worth telling. It's the story of Christ in me, the hope of glory. That's a story worth telling. The story that I was told my whole life about who I am, that's not a story worth telling. Because once again, we were all told that same story. What's the point of telling the story that we've all been told our whole life? We can tell a different story. The world needs to hear a different story. The world needs to stop hearing, you're a sinner, you're going to die and go to hell. That story isn't helping anybody. Nobody's coming in here because I don't want to go to hell. Somebody told me that I'm bad and I'm going to burn in hell, and so I'm going to come here because I don't want to go there. Guess what? The people you're telling are going to go to hell one day, they don't believe in hell. Hopefully they find a church where the pastor doesn't either. Once again, I still believe in hell. Just not a literal place. I've been there. Most of us have been there. Some of us are in there right now, right, Aaron? You're going to tell me that God's going to put Aaron in a worse place than he is right now? You're going to tell Aaron that God's going to do something worse than what's already happened to him his whole life? But he's a loving, just, friendly, happy God? Get out of here with that nonsense. People aren't buying our story anymore. Churches are emptying because people don't believe the story. Because our story doesn't sound like a nice story. It doesn't have a good story. But the story of Christ, the story of the death, burial, and resurrection of Jesus Christ, that is the greatest story that's ever been told. The story of Christ putting Himself inside of you, perfectly crafting you in this beautiful jar of clay that He then resides in. That's an amazing story that needs to be told. You overcoming all of the tragedy that's gone on in your life and being able to stand in the power of Christ, that is a story that is worth being told. These are the stories people need to hear. But we go out and smack them in the face with the Scriptures and say, see, you're going to burn in hell one day. Why don't you come to my church? You know, I play this online game. And there's this tactic, if somebody finds a player that's not in an alliance, they just attack them and take all of the resources. And they say, if you want me to stop attacking you, join our alliance. We're friendly. I actually got somebody to join our alliance recently by doing that to them. People who play this game with me, they think it's hilarious because I tell them, I change my name to Peacemaker, and they say, all I ever do is preach about peace. And they're like, that's not you, because in the game, I'm all like, hey, we need to go to war. We need to kill some people. It's a game. It's fun. It's how I get out my aggression. But that's what we do to people. We attack them, and we beat them, and we lie to them, and we say, if you want this to stop, become a Christian. And we'll stop smacking you in the face with the Bible every day. We'll stop attacking you. We'll stop telling you things about you that aren't true. If you join us. The tactic might have worked for a while. It's not working anymore. We have to change the story. Before we can change the story of the church, we have to change the story of the members in the church. In order for us to change our stories, we have to be willing to kick out the people who are making the story be something we don't want it to be. We have to recast it, rewrite it, and redirect it to make it be the story of my life, not the story of some predestined thing that the world put into me, but the story of me, who God made me to be. So what is free will? I have no idea. Is free will the ability to do whatever it is I want to do, whenever it is I want to do it? I hope not. I hope free will is the ability for me to write my own story. For me to overcome the things I've been told about me. For me to write a version of my life that's more in sync with who Christ is in me, who Christ is in the world, and who Christ is seated at the right hand of God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. I hope your story is the same. I want to hear your story. I want to hear your story of the world. I want to hear your story of overcoming the world. I want to hear your story about how you went to the cross and you died. How you went into the tomb and were buried. And how you resurrected with a clean slate. With a clean cast of characters, clean sheet of paper to begin writing your own story. To me, that's free will. That's the decision that we have the free will to make. Continue to live somebody else's version of my life, or start living Christ's version of my life. It's not about sin. It's not about obedience. It's about loving yourself to recognize that you're worthy of a different story. Last thing here in Colossians, he says, and above all these, put on love, which binds everything together in perfect harmony. Put on love. Love your neighbor as yourself. First thing you have to do is learn how to love yourself. Love your story. Not the story you were told about you, but the story that is true about you. Love that version of you. And then learn how to be a better husband or a better father or a better neighbor or a better mom or a better aunt or a better uncle. I mean, I see what Darlene does for Kevin. She needs to learn how to be a better aunt for that boy. She needs to help him out a little bit. Right? And we have to learn how to be the best version of us to whoever it is that's in our life. We may not be parents. We may not be married. We may not have somebody else. But you do have somebody in your life that needs you to love them the way Christ loves you. But you have to love you first. I can't love you if I don't love me. Let's put on love. Let's write a better story. Let's cast it with better characters. Let's reclaim our free will. Amen?